We're on chapter 3, page 83. Laci Peterson then had already endured one encounter with domestic violence, yet as the Department of Justice Missing Persons report pointed out, even though persons close to her believed under normal circumstances she would have physically resisted an assault, her advanced stage of pregnancy and resultant limitations would have likely hampered any attempt to defend herself. In November, Laci began attending a maternity yoga class which met on Mondays at noon. People in the neighborhood told investigators that they saw her walking her dog during that period, but as the pregnancy advanced, Laci's complained of exhaustion. Relatives told police that she had even used a wheelchair while visiting Disneyland with Scott's parents and half-sister Ann Bird, although Bird would later say that the chair was just a gag to please Laci. In our interview, Ann told me that Laci looked radiant during that trip. She was excited about having the baby and talked a lot about how much she loved her mother, Sharon. Ann first met Laci on March 1998, about 7 months after the wedding. She liked her immediately. Laci filled up the room, loved being the center of attention, and rarely let anyone else get in a word otherwise. Like Laci's other girlfriends, Ann agreed that Laci did boss Scott around, and like those women, Ann wished that she had a husband like Scott who did everything his wife told him with a smile. Ann also attended Laci's baby shower nearly along with 50 other women. At one point, she recalled, Laci was stifling laughter over a close friend of Jackie's who turned up in go-go boots. Ann recognized the woman from several pictures hanging in Jackie's house. Weird people, she mouthed to Ann as her sister-in-law tried to keep a straight face. By the time the due date approached, Scott and Laci were spending money quite freely. They went all out decorating the inside of their home, splurging on new furnishings, especially in the nursery. From the outside, however, the house looked unkept and in need of repairs. Scott still played golf regularly, and then his parents ponied up $23,000 admission fee. On December 1st, he joined the Del Rio Country Club. The $390 a month dues were Scott's responsibility. The couple enjoyed entertaining. Their friends knew Laci would be a gourmet cook. According to her friends, Laci put a great deal of effort into her appearance. Spa treatments, miniatures, and pedicures were part of her normal routine. She also loved shopping and was described as a clothes horse. She used the internet to search for Christmas presents and scoped out the local malls on a regular basis. While she loved finding a bargain, she didn't hesitate to pull full price if she wanted a particular item. Laci kept a running list of new objects the couple agreed to buy for their home. Her long-range goals included having more children and to buy a larger house and a new vehicle. Even as she planned to remain a stay-at-home mom, during one of the conversations with Sharon, Scott joked that they might have had to pitch a tent in his mother-in-law's driveway if their spending habits were not restrained. 2 days before her disappearance, Laci's brother Brent phoned from home in Elk Grove to find out about the couple's plans for Christmas. He asked if he could bring their grandfather, Robert Rocha, down from the nursing home in Sacramento on Christmas morning. Laci readily agreed. After her 10:30 brunch, everyone could open presents. She and Scott would purchase a fruit basket or something similar for their grandfather. In hindsight, it seemed like a charade. Scott spent so much time and money decorating Connor's room, taking Laci's ring in for the jeweler for Christmas, rushing over to feel his baby's kick, despite telling others he was hoping for infertility. But on December 23rd, 2002, Scott seemed to be planning nothing more than a quiet holiday, entertaining family, and enjoying his wife's company. Chapter 4, Searches. Over the next 3 days, police conducted a number of searches of Scott's home, warehouse, and boat. They initiated grid searches by air, and the bloodhound searched on the grounds. And their work yielded valuable clues, only some of which the jury heard about during the trial. The following pages are based on a complete record of those searches, along with the unpublished conversations between the police and Scott Peterson. By December 26, 2002, Scott's office on Emerald Street was under surveillance. No one could enter the business until pending search warrants had been served. I felt if the evidence was present at the Emerald Avenue location, evidence destruction at that location could be completed without witnesses in the remote and mostly unoccupied industrial area in the late evening and early morning hours, Detective Craig Grogan reported. Members of the Modesto Fire Department were combing through Tuolumne, 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 combing through the Tuolumne River on Dry Creek Park, and a neighborhood canvass was underway, with officers going from house to house looking for individuals who may have seen anything out of the ordinary. As per Scott Grogan's instructions, police also compiled a list of potential suspects focusing on prior offenders and known sex offenders in the area. He told Officer Tom Rea to highlight any transients with violent backgrounds. Just before 10, Detective Grogan received a call. The officer in the field had just interviewed a woman who claimed to have seen the female in the early morning hours of December 24th, dressed in black pants and a white shirt. She said the woman was pregnant and walking a dog. Another tip came from the woman Diana Campos, a 46-year-old custodian at the Stanislaus County Hospital. At 10:45 a.m., while on a smoking break outside of the hospital, Campos said that she had seen 3 people and a dog together in the park heading west. She watched the three as they walked roughly the distance of a football field. The dog, a golden retriever, was barking incessantly, and the woman was tugging on the lead as if trying to calm him. One of the men, who had what Campos described as a beanie cap atop his head, shouted, "Shut the fucking dog up." Campos watched as she puffed on her cigarette but did not sense any serious conflict between the individuals. In fact, she thought nothing of the sighting until December 26, when she saw the flyer describing Lacey Peterson. When I looked at the flyer, I said to myself, I know the girl. She insisted that the woman she had seen in Moose Park was Lacey Peterson and told Detective Owen that she would not have had called the police unless she were sure. Yet Campos backpedaled slightly a few moments later, saying that she was only pretty sure. I am real good with faces, she told the detective. Campos described the woman as wearing a white top and sweatpants with dark shoulder-length hair. She appeared to be 6 or 7 months pregnant. The golden retriever was medium in size with brown-red fur, but Campos could not recall the color of its leash. She described both men in their 30s, around 5'7", with medium builds. One wore a beanie and a styled cap, dirty clothes, and a dark shirt with blue jeans. The second man had short brown hair and was dressed in jeans and a torn denim jacket. Campos said that she was about 50 feet away from the group. Over the course of the investigation, there would be several more reports like these, but no timeline was ever established, while Scott's defense lawyer, Mark Gregaros, promised to produce these folks in the trial. He never did. He was able to interject some of the information during cross-examination of police officers, but during his case in chief, none of these people took the stand. Around noon, Detective Al Brockney began tracking Scott's alibi. When he spoke with the Berkeley Marina harbor master, Ray Forsberg, the man was adamant it had not rained at the marina on December 24th. This information directly contradicted the story Scott had told Brocchini only 24 hours before, and prompted the men to secure a search warrant. After hearing Forsberg's report, Brocchini went straight to the police headquarters, where he and Detective Grogan completed a search warrant applications for the 523 Covana Avenue and the 1027 Emerald Avenue. On the surface, these two officers seemed to be cut from the same cloth. Short and stocky, each of them sporting the business suit of the plainclothes detective. Yet there were critical differences between the two. Brockney, his dark hair cut in military style, had a well-defined chin, broad shoulders. Had a well-defined chin, broad facial features, and frameless glasses. He was quicker to react and to confront or challenge a witness. Grogan, whose brown hair was tinged with red, sported a thick mustache and bright, observant eyes. The more seasoned of the two, he was much more low-key. Early in the investigation, Scott would accuse Brockney of trying to trick him. Grogan was much more likely to assume the good cop role, and it was he who proved better able to engage with Scott in the cat and mouse game that they would play in the coming days. Applications in hand, the two investigators hurried to the courthouse to obtain the judge's approval for the searches, and as they arrived, Grogan's cell phone rang. A detective posted outside of Scott's warehouse was calling to let them know that a man driving a bronze Ford F-150 had pulled up, wanting to retrieve a computer from the office. The man whom the police turned away was Scott Peterson. The officer told him to contact Grogan or Brockney for more information. At 3:10, Judge Nancy Ashley signed the warrants, clearing the way for the search. Before Brockney could get out of the room, the phone rang as well. It was Scott, asking why the warrant was even necessary. The detective explained that it was just a precaution, reminding Scott that he'd reneged on his agreement to take a polygraph just moments before it was scheduled. Scott suggested that the detectives meet him at headquarters for a 3:30 press briefing so that they could discuss the search then. Moments later, the officers were standing in the hallway outside of the press room. Then Scott called again, changing the rules. He had left the news conference early, he said. Now he wanted the men to come to his house. Before they could leave, Lacey's stepfather approached. Gratzky said that his son-in-law had just gotten up and walked out of the press conference, obviously angry at the reporters' questions about his behavior. At 4 o'clock, the officers edged their vehicle around a line of media satellite trucks and pulled up to the Petersons' house. Dozens of journalists had staked out the home, waiting for updates on the case. The media was there at Scott's disposal, but he had no intentions using them to find Lacey. In fact, he was clearly avoiding them. Coordinated between Modesto police sawhorses, the reporters all missed what happened next. The jury was never allowed to hear what Scott and the officers discussed that afternoon, including the telling conversation with Jackie Peterson. Scott's antics over the search warrant for 523 Covina, and the full details of the bloodhound searches conducted at his home and warehouse. Through the window, the detectives could see Scott was sitting alone at the dining room table, calmly pursuing a newspaper. They knocked, and without rising, Scott yelled, "Come in!" He invited them to join him at the long wood table. Scott had gone to the warehouse. He said he got a photograph of Lacey off his office computer for a flyer he had been preparing. He was perturbed that he wasn't told about the lockdown of his office or the pending search, and reiterated that he would have given permission if the detectives had simply asked. Just 36 hours into the investigation, Scott was already displaying his arrogance, trying to seize the upper hand by setting up confrontations with the very people that were there trying to help Lacey. He was telegraphing a message: "This is my territory, I'm in charge here." Grogan interjected, redirecting the conversation to the importance of a timely search. There might have been evidence of a stranger entering into the home, then cleaning up to eliminate signs of an attack. He also explained that searching for Scott's place of his business. Sorry. I'm cold reading. Sorry, guys. There might be evidence of a stranger entering the home, then cleaning up to eliminate signs of an attack. He also explained that searching Scott's place of business, his vehicles, and his computers might provide valuable clues of a stalker, or even Lacey's possible demeanor. The investigators assumed he would agree to the searches. Producing waivers that eliminated the need for a warrant, the detectives asked Scott for his signature. Scott read the papers intently and then looked up. "You don't expect me to sign these right now, do you? I'm going to have to... You don't expect me to sign these right now, do you? I'm going to have to consult with an attorney before I sign anything." Grogan shrugged. "Have you retained an attorney?" Handing back the waivers, Scott replied, "I've made some calls, but I have not hired anyone yet." At that point, Sergeant Ron Cloward entered the room and interrupted the exchange. He needed an article of Lacey's clothing to use for the canine search. Scott allowed him to take Lacey's brown hairbrush, a pink Jones of New York slipper, and a pair of Ralph Lauren sunglasses and a brown eyeglass case. Cloward also retrieved an item of Scott's, a green and blue slipper from the Gap. "Why are you writing down the items that you're taking?" Scott asked. Cloward also retrieved an item of Scott's, a green and blue slipper from the Gap. "Are you writing down the items that you are taking?" Scott asked. "Yes," Grogan replied. As a uniform officer prepared the slip, Scott interrupted, sliding some papers across the table to prevent the cop from scratching the wooden tabletop as he wrote. As Detective Brockney noted, it was just like Scott's behavior with Lacey's Land Rover. However disengaging he may have seemed from his wife's disappearance, he was clearly eager to protect property that had value to him. As the detective made another note of Scott's unusual concerns, Cloward offered Scott his receipt from the borrowed items, and Scott readily accepted. Around 4:30, Jackie and Lee Peterson arrived at the house. Scott's mother had just left the news conference. She was complaining about the Chief Wasden's comment that it would be strange for Lacey to go walking without her cell phone. "Everybody knows Lacey's cell phone had been dead for weeks," she griped. "So why would she be taking it on walks with her?" When I read this in the police report, I wondered why Jackie was interpreting this comment as an indictment of her son. She was already feeling the need to protect him. Was this because she knew something about Lacey, or because she had done so often in the past? Brockney knew that Lacey's cell phone was dead. He had checked it the previous evening. If what Jackie Peterson was saying was true, he asked, then why did Scott leave a message on that cell phone Christmas Eve? I was just repeating what other people said, she snapped. As the afternoon wore on, more officers were dispatched to 523 Covina to assist with crowd control. They were setting up the wooden sawhorses to contain the growing throng when a woman ran out of the house across the street, screaming that she had been robbed. Susan Medina excitedly explained that she and her husband, Rodolfo, had just returned from holiday in Los Angeles to find their home ransacked. Officer Faitner and Myers followed her to investigate. The point of entry was clearly the south side of Medina's home at 516 Covina, where a set of French doors had been kicked in. The shoe print was visible on the right door below the handle. Drawers were open and the closet tossed throughout the dwelling. Rodolfo Medina told the officers that a personal safe in the master bedroom, which had been concealed by the maroon bedsheets, was missing. A hammer and a glove were found inside the master suite. The burglar had apparently used a hammer to crack the safe. The hand truck stored inside the owner's tool shop behind the house was now on the porch. The intruder must have used it to transport the safe to the front of the house. In the backyard, police found items from the tool shed, including an air compressor and a gas-powered leaf blower. A number of power tools were missing. Officers wanted a list of people who knew about the Medina's holiday plans and the names of businesses and persons who had been at the residence. They fingerprinted family members before leaving. This burglary would become important to Scott's defense in the months to come. Across the way at the Petersons' residence, the attorney named Ross Lee was meeting with Scott in the rear bedroom. When Lee emerged, he introduced himself as Trade Corp's corporate attorney and told the officers that he had referred Scott to a criminal lawyer, Kirk McAllister. Scott returned to the dining room and he left a message for McAllister. He pulled up a chair to the table where his father Lee and his sister Susan Cudillo were talking with Captain Christopher Boyer. Boyer headed up the Contra Costa County Emergency Services Search and Rescue and was in charge of the K-9 team assigned to the search the area where around the Petersons' home. Linda Valentine, a dog handler, was also present. While everybody was waiting for a call from Scott's attorney, Captain Bauer interviewed Scott in preparation for the Bloodhound search. Brockney listened quietly as Scott responded to Boyer's questions. He paid close attention as Scott detailed the items of clothing that he and his wife had been wearing on the morning of her disappearance. The black maternity pants and white long-sleeve blouse with a crew neck. What type of shoes was Lacey wearing? Boyer inquired. Scott replied that his wife was barefoot when he left. What shoes does Lacey normally wear before she goes walking? White tennis shoes, he replied. Were any tennis shoes missing? Brockney was surprised to hear Scott say that he hadn't checked, nor had he gone to look to see if any of her jackets were missing. This critical information could help determine whether she had gone for a walk or been abducted from inside the home. Captain Boyer left the residence and began the search, and Brockney followed him outside. Boyer commented that in his 20 years of experience, this was the first time he had ever asked for a receipt for items taken to help locating a missing persons. Brockney just nodded. It was 5 o'clock before Grogan again asked Scott if he had talked to a lawyer about the search warrant waivers. "Not yet," he replied. Grogan then pulled up some papers from his pocket and began to recite. "I have prepared a search warrant that covers your home, your vehicles, boat, and place of work. The searches will be carried out over a period of a few days in a very slow and methodical way to hopefully find evidence that will aid in our investigation of Lacey's disappearance." Scott's reaction was immediate. "Where's the trust?" he demanded, looking directly at Brockney. "Why did you fill out all those forms and ask if you could search if you already had a warrant?" "Just to prove you sketchy." It was then that Scott accused Brockney of tricking him on Christmas Eve. The audacity on Christmas Eve! Brockney had left his keys in Scott's car the first night and his notebook in Scott's boat. Now Scott suggested that Brockney had staged the whole thing to give him an excuse to go back and take a second look. Way to go. Way to go, sir. I'm so proud of good police work. Scott said, "I took his gun out of his car and took his mop bucket and wet towels on Christmas Eve without telling him. I reminded Scott that he had consented to the evidence search on Christmas Eve, and I apologized that I did not immediately tell him what I had taken." Scott agreed and said that he felt betrayed since I did not tell him about the items I took until he asked. Brockney noted this in his ongoing police report. Grogan explained that he wasn't confident that Scott would allow the search and that he wanted to give the opportunity to consent. Scott's change of heart over the polygraph, after all, was the behavior Grogan had to go on. Now the detective told Scott that he would have to vacate the house within 15 minutes and would need permission to remove anything when he left. Get him, sir." With search warrants in hand, Scott strode to the kitchen counter, grabbed a piece of paper, and thrust it at Brockney. "Here," Scott said. It was a 2-day fishing license dated December 23rd and 24th, 2002. He must have seen the item listed on the warrant. As the investigator placed it in his folder, the telephone rang. It was Kirk McAllister, the attorney. Scott took the call in the back bedroom. Moments later, he returned, telling Detective Grogan that the lawyer wanted to speak to him. McAllister informed Grogan that he was now representing Peterson and had informed his client not to speak further without an attorney present. McAllister knew that there were questions his client should address, but Scott would make himself readily available. However, he advised Scott not to take a polygraph. Just before 6 o'clock, Scott Peterson and his family gathered their belongings and headed to the front door. Grogan stopped Scott and asked for a set of keys to his truck, home, and business. Scott handed them over and then quickly left the house. Brockney and Grogan secured the premises, then left as well. Grogan and Brockney then joined Captain Boyer and the other dog handlers in Dry Creek Park, and Grogan listened as Boyer detailed his current findings. Based on the dog's behavior, he believed that Lacey had left the residence in a vehicle and not on foot. After the dog picked up her scent, they ran down the middle of Covina Avenue and followed a trail rather than tracking on the sidewalk. The primary tracker, a bloodhound named Merlin, started at the Petersons' house and then headed north on Covina Avenue, west on Edgebrook Drive, and then south on Highland Drive. At Santa Barbara Avenue, he turned east until he reached Loma Avenue. The animal went to the rear of a caching establishment at the corner of La Loma and Yosemite Boulevard, and then continued westbound on Yosemite. He stopped in the area of Santa Rosa Avenue, where he turned south. At this point, Merlin's handler, Cindy Valentine, wasn't sure if the dog was still following the trail. The dog's behavior was now different from when he was earlier on distinct alert, she had told Gorgon. A deputy lieutenant with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department, Valentine had joined the search dog steering committee of the state's Office of Emergency Services a year ago. The agency was responsible for the development and publications of statewide guidelines for all search and rescue dogs in California. Valentine worked as a horse trainer before expanding to professional dog training in 1991. Her unique background also included positions as an evaluator and trainer for several state certifying agencies for working dogs. Valentine explained that the dog tracking Lacey ran in a manner consistent with the vehicle trail as opposed to a trail left by a person that was walking. Grogan asked Valentine to take Merlin to Scott's warehouse. Valentine agreed, but requested that the pair start at a nearby intersection. She wanted to see where, if at all, Merlin would pick up Lacey's scent. At 9:30 p.m., Detective Brockney, Lieutenant Valentine, and Merlin were standing on the intersection of Kansas Avenue and Emerald, about 3 miles south of Scott's business. Valentine herself did not know where Scott's business was. Brockney watched as the animal sniffed Lacey's sunglasses case and picked up the scent, walking around in a circle on Emerald Drive, then after only a few seconds began trotting south on Emerald. Brockney followed Valentine and Boyer as they chased Merlin through the intersection at Kansas. The dog's tail was up as he trotted at a steady pace down the center of the road. Merlin ran back into the parking lot of the laundromat on the southeast corner of Kansas and Emerald, slowing slightly, and then trotted back onto southbound Emerald. Merlin continued south on Emerald Loletta when Brockney asked Valentine to stop the dog. The dog was then returned to the initial starting point. Again, he ran south through the intersection, following the exact route he had just taken. The officer stopped Merlin on the southbound Emerald near Loletta. The dog handler told Brockney that there had been no doubt in her mind that Merlin was following Lacey's strongest scent. That scent was leading him southbound on Emerald. The dog was tracking away from Scott's business, not towards it. He asked Valentine and Boyer to explain what the strongest scent would be if Lacey had been driven to a location, remained at that site for an hour or more, and then was driven away. They explained that most of the recent scent when Lacey left the location would be the strongest. Lieutenant Valentine then asked Brockney to take her to the business. She explained that she needed to have a starting place or a stopping place when conducting a bloodhound scent search to testify in court. Brockney took Valentine and Boyer to the parking lot of Scott's warehouse on 1027 Emerald and showed them the Suite B. The detective watched as she let Merlin in the center of the parking lot and walked him towards Scott's place of business. Once the dog neared the suite, his tail immediately went up, indicating that he had picked up on Lacey's scent. Merlin immediately began trotting eastbound away from the business near down the north driveway. The detective trailed Valentine and her dog east through the parking lot and followed as the dog took an off southbound Dog again took off southbound on Emerald right down the middle of the street. The group continued south past Kansas Avenue until they reached the intersection of Emerald and Highway 132. Merlin slowed down at the intersection, appearing to have lost Lacey's scent. Deputy Bauer explained that a large intersection with heavy traffic such as this one sometimes mixed up the scent. Valentine said that it would take the dog a short time to relocate the scent. Next, they did an exercise called the Four Corners, walking the dog around the entire intersection. In the process, Merlin relocated Lacey's scent and took off westbound down the center highway 132. Brockney and the others followed the dog about 400 yards before pulling up. It appeared that the dog would have continued running on the highway if they hadn't stopped him. Valentine told Brockney that she could testify that Merlin followed Lacey's scent from 1027 Emerald southbound and then westbound on Highway 132. I told him again that this trail was consistent with a vehicle trail. Valentine later wrote in her official report. Brockney realized that the path Merlin had taken was the exact route that Scott Peterson had driven to go fishing. The detective later measured the distance from Scott's place of business to the spot where the dog had pulled up. Merlin had trailed Lacey Peterson's scent 1.1 miles. It was after 10:30 in the evening when Lieutenant Valentine and Merlin completed the search around 1027 Emerald Avenue. Captain Boyer gave the detective all the items they had used: Lacey's pink slipper, her Ralph Lauren sunglasses and case, her brown hairbrush, and her husband's Gap slipper. It had been a very long day, but Brockney went back to headquarters to examine Scott's truck, impounded earlier that evening. His search proved fruitless. During the search, I did not see Peterson's tan camouflage jacket that I had seen in the truck on 12/24/02. I also did not see the Big Five containing 2 fish lures. I also did not see the Big Five bag containing 2 fishing lures, the backyard umbrellas that were wrapped in the blue tarp, and the tan-colored tarp that had been bunched up in the back of the truck, or the shotgun shells that I had seen in the green toolbox, Brockney later wrote. It appeared that Scott Peterson had removed several items from his truck between 12/24/02 and the time that the search warrant had been served. Brockney did find a partial roll of chicken wire and a small hand tool that had a gardening fork on one side and a hoe on the other. The tool was coated with dry cement, he wrote. It looked like it was used to mix ready-mix cement. There were loose ready-mix cement in the bed of the truck. In the subsequent search, police found what appeared to be 4 small bloodstains on the interior side of the driver's door. The suspected bloodstain was also collected from the back of the steering wheel. Following the preliminary inspection, the pickup was turned over to the FBI forensic evidence team, which had traveled from Sacramento to assist the police. Members of the team sprayed the questionable stains with Hemoglow, a fluid used to detect bloodstains. All the areas fluoresced. Fluoresced? Oh, ooh. It's gonna be fluoresced. Fluoresced. Fluorescence, they fluoresced, right? Oh. In addition, an area of the interior door pocket and on the vehicle's door handle tested positive. At 10:45, Detective Grogan received a call from Scott Peterson asking about the bloodhound search. The detective advised him that the dog had tracked away from his home through a series of residential streets down to Yosemite Boulevard and then turned west. During the 5-minute conversation, Grogan admitted that the dog had lost the scent after traveling a distance on Yosemite. "Have you been able to get any sleep?" Grogan asked before hanging up that night. The detective recorded Scott's reply. He didn't sleep well in a different bed. He now had the comfort in his own home with the smell of Lacey in their bed. Within 24 hours of Lacey's disappearance, her family and friends set up a command center at the local inn, the Red Lion Hotel, to assist the police with their search for Lacey. The general manager, Brad Saltzman, donated rooms for the effort. Thousands of flyers with Lacey's photo and reward information were printed. Hundreds of people hit the streets in those first days, distributing the materials and searching the Modesto area for signs of Lacey. Sharon and Ron Gratzky and Jackie and Lee Peterson were out before the cameras in the early days, but Scott was nowhere to be found. The young husband and father-to-be was declining all requests for television appearances, telling journalists that he wanted to keep the focus on Lacey, not on him. This was unusual behavior for anyone in Scott's position and, in fact, brought about the opposite result. Scott's absence quickly became a topic of interest in the press. Ironically, I later learned that it was one of Scott's parents, either Jackie or Lee, who had alerted the national media to the story through the connection with the Associated Press. It is my belief that Scott never expected the media attention that the case drew. I think he also miscalculated the abilities of the 275-member Modesto Police Department. He probably thought that some small-town cops on Christmas Eve were no match for him and expected the story to disappear rapidly from the news when Lacey's body could not be found. If so, Scott Peterson chose the wrong small-town cops. Not today, Scott. Ugh. God, this dude's the worst. Scott chose the wrong small-town cops. The Modesto Police Department has a 90% homicide clearance rate, almost a third better than the national average. Round of applause, round of applause. Detective Craig Grogan dispatched officers to the Berkeley Marina, where Scott Peterson said that he had launched his boat on the day that Lacey disappeared. The temperature was a cool 52 degrees. The December air humid as Sergeant Andy Schleckner and Detective Rick Armendariz. Nice. Detective Rick Armendariz pulled into the marina parking area at 201 University Avenue on December 27th. The Golden Gate Bridge and San Francisco skyline were buried in a dense layer of morning fog as the officers stepped out of their car. The marina, office and operated by the city of Berkeley, is administered by the Parks and Waterfront Department. The expansive facility encompasses 52 acres of water and includes 975 berths. 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 Also on the ground are several restaurants, a DoubleTree hotel, and a 3,000-foot long public fishing pier. The parking lot immediately north of the marina's boat basin included a 4-lane launch ramp that was open to the public. An automated Iron Ranger ticket machine stands next to the boat ramp, providing customers a receipt upon paying the $5 launch fee. As Detective Armendariz snapped photos of the area, Sergeant Schleckner located groundskeeper Mike Ilvesta. 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 Sorry, sir. Sorry, Mike. Mr. Mike Ilvesta confirmed that members of the press had been canvassing the landing pier, trying to find anyone who had seen Scott on December 24th. Ilvesta was working that day from about 6:30 in the morning to 2 p.m. in the afternoon. He recalled that there were a few visitors to the marina that day, and although the day was cloudy and overcast, it had not rained, despite what Scott had told the police. Over the gentle clanging of sailboat riggings, Ilvesta described seeing a new full-size dark green Ford 4x4 extended cab pickup truck with a smaller boat trailer, arriving around 12:45 p.m. on December 24th. The Ford's trailer was empty and the vehicle was backing into the ramp area. The driver was a white male in his 30s with a sandy-colored hair, wearing what looked like a polo shirt. The Ford was blocking Ilvesta's path, and the driver was having trouble backing the trailer down the ramp. Ilvesta waited while the man drove back and forth, trying to align the truck trailer. After several minutes, the driver succeeded, and Ilvesta was able to pass. Ilvesta left the area and continued with his workday. Producing a photograph of Scott's bronze pickup, Armendariz showed it to Ilvesta. The groundskeeper said that while the truck he had seen looked familiar, he couldn't be certain it was the same one. The detectives next showed Ilvesta a photo lineup that included a picture of Scott. Ilvesta studied the image but didn't recognize the driver of the Ford. Armendariz then produced a picture of Lacey and asked if he had seen her at the marina. He had not. The investigators next interviewed the marina's waterfront manager, Cliff Marchetti. Marchetti had spent much of December 24th working in the office on the south shore of the grounds across the boat-filled marina. He did not go over to the boat launch area, and he had not seen any customers. He did confirm Ilvesta's account of the weather as cloudy with overcast but no rain. Marchetti said that it was unusual for a fisherman to take a 40-foot aluminum boat out on the bay in late December because the weather conditions of the fishing season. He explained that crab fishing was the only type of fishing a person could do in a boat at that time of year. All other fishing is out of season, he explained. Two workers at the marina bait shop said that they did not remember seeing anybody in the boat launch area on December 24th. They too remembered it as cloudy but not a rainy day. In addition to crab, they said they were only likely to be caught were sand dabs, a flatfish, and possibly perch and sturgeon. The detective next drove to Chevron gas station on Frontage Road in the city of Livermore, trying to establish where Scott had allegedly bought fuel. The assistant manager told him that he had worked Christmas Eve and provided the police with the surveillance tape for that day. He then directed the officers to another Chevron station on North Vasco Road, where they retrieved another surveillance tape. Meanwhile, at the Adobe-style police headquarters in the downtown Modesto, Detective Bueller was interviewing two of Lacey's friends, Stacy Boyers and Lori Ellsworth. Lacey's friends had briefly met the tall, rugged detective at the Red Lion Hotel on Christmas Day. He had been working around the clock since the case broke. For Bueller, The Petersons' case came on the heels of a double homicide that he had been assigned to 10 days earlier. The 2 long hours were taxing on the divorced dad. While his ex-wife cared for their daughter, Bueller had full custody of his teenage son and needed to be home for him. Bueller had managed well enough this far. His boy was getting A's and B's in school, but the night calls were hard. When his son was younger, Bueller sometimes bundled him up in a blanket and took him along to crime scenes, leaving him to sleep in the back of an unmarked car while he conducted his investigation. He'd gotten the scare of his life one night when he returned to his vehicle to find the boy gone. He combed the area frantically until moments later he found his son in a CSI truck talking with the guys. With only a brief and terrifying experience to go by, he knew that he could not imagine how the Rochas were coping. Bueller gave Lacey's friend an update on the case. Police were examining several possible scenarios, one based on the assumption that a stranger had entered the Petersons' house, committed an act of violence, and then taken Lacey's body away. The second involving Scott. Both Stacy and Lori told Bueller that they thought it was more likely that Scott was responsible. They were growing increasingly suspicious as the days passed. Stacy had been to the Petersons' home on Christmas Day and observed Scott doing an unusual amount of vacuuming in the laundry room and in the living room area near the chairs and couch. When she questioned him, he said that he was just trying to occupy himself. If Lacey was there, he said, she would be doing the same thing because she was extremely clean. Both women found his remarks strange. They knew Lacey Scott quite well, and while Lacey was a big fan of Martha Stewart's entertaining style, neither she nor Scott seemed like clean freaks. Stacy also told Bauer that on Thursday evening, when Scott and his family were told to leave the residence before the search, Scott announced that he was growing angry. He didn't like being taken out of his comfort zone, he told Stacy. Yet neither woman believed that there was any trouble in the couple's relationships and could not direct Bueller to anyone who might disagree. As Bueller took notes, Stacy told the officer that she and Lacey had been best friends since the 3rd grade. Aw. Had last spoken to her on December 23rd around 4:45 in the afternoon, when Lacey had called about the holidays and her pregnancy. The mom-to-be had complained that she was physically uncomfortable, but she was excited about becoming a mother. Stacy knew that Lacey experienced female problems in the past and confirmed that she was overjoyed with her pregnancy. Lacey had recently began complaining about breathing, and Stacy suggested that she give up her walks in Dry Creek Park. It seemed unlikely that she had walked in the area of Thousand Oaks Park, Detective Bueller concluded after speaking with Lacey's friends. This location would require one to walk down and to return up several grades. Despite Scott's overnight trips, Stacy had never heard Lacey express any mistrust of her husband. Lacey was not the jealous type, she said. She had never heard the two quarrel or complain. Then around 5:15 p.m. on December 24th, Scott had called Stacy in a panic. Scott probably got the time wrong by a few minutes. At 5:17, Scott was talking to Sharon Rocha. He told Stacy that the police were on the way and that they had said something about his dog being found by a neighbor in the front yard. He asked Stacy if she knew anyone that drove a white Ranger because she had no idea what that question meant. He asked Stacy if she knew anyone who drove a white Ranger, but she had no idea what that question meant. Lori Ellsworth spoke up next. She and Lacey were close. They spoke every couple of weeks, and she often attended dinner parties at the Petersons. Lori confirmed that Lacey had seemed tired in the recent days. It made no sense that she would have been walking Mackenzie in the park on Christmas Eve, nor did Lori believe that Lacey would leave home without her cell phone at that stage of pregnancy. Lori also described the couple's golden retriever as a barker and believed Mackenzie would have made a noise if someone tried to approach his mistress. Both women said that they had never heard Lacey discuss the couple's finances, but thought that she and Scott were doing fine, assuming that between them they were earning more than $80,000 a year. The woman described the jewelry that Lacey had recently inherited. The pieces were very important to Lacey. She'd been wearing several of them in late November when the women got together to watch The Bachelor. The jewelry was not really Lacey's style, but she refused to leave the pieces at home because she feared they might be stolen. The detectives asked about Lacey's mental state. He had heard rumors that Lacey had been depressed. Both women disagreed. Although she struggled with physical limitations, which kept her from enjoying the holidays as much as she normally did, she knew that the pregnancy would soon be over and that her health would return to normal. Both Stacy and Lori conceded that their family members' opinions of Scott were becoming more divided as time went by, particularly as Scott's flat affect contrasted even more dramatically with Sharon Rocha's fear and grief. Bueller also interviewed Jake Zimet, a retired highway patrol officer and Stacy's boyfriend for the past 4 months. When he and Stacy had thrown a holiday party on December 14th, he had noticed that Lacey arrived alone. Her husband was at a business function. Okay. Here we are. This is why I like to rush back to tell you guys the story, because I'm pissed. I don't want to read this by myself. Her husband was at a business function, she said, and couldn't attend. A photograph taken at the party of a very pregnant Lacey in a festive red pantsuit would become a mainstay of media reports throughout the case. Although she was smiling brightly for the camera, I found something very sad about her eyes in that picture, as she sat alone in a large wicker armchair. As the photo was taken, another camera was snapping what would become an equally famous image, that of Amber Frey and Scott in formal attire at an event 96 miles away. Zimet didn't meet Scott until the day Lacey went missing. When Scott phoned Stacy a second time that afternoon, the retired policeman remembered that he was weeping hysterically. Yet when he arrived at the Petersons' home a short time later, Zimet was surprised to see no signs that Scott had been crying. His eyes were not red or watery, nor did his face appear flushed. Zimet also got the impression that Scott was avoiding him, possibly because of their status as a former cop. Zimet expressed uneasiness about Scott, but he was sure that Lacey's family would stand by their son-in-law in the absence of a clear proof that he was involved. I gotta go. I'm all pissed off.